Greetings, fellow history seekers. Before we journey back in time, I want you to find a quiet space, take a deep breath, and close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the scent of pine needles and damp earth, the sound of a wind that has never touched a paved road, and the silence of a world where the only light at night came from the stars. As you settle into this vision, please consider supporting our journey by liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel. It is your curiosity that keeps these forgotten stories alive. I am reaching out to you from a place where history feels alive in every stone and shadow, and today, I invite you to walk through the mist of the 18th century with me. The year is 1750. To the modern eye, the American frontier was not a map of states, but a vast, breathing ocean of emerald forests and jagged mountains that seemed to stretch into eternity. This was a land untouched by the gears of the Industrial Revolution, a cathedral of ancient oaks and rushing rivers where the air was so clear it felt like drinking from a mountain spring. However, for the early settlers arriving on these shores, this beauty was masked by a terrifying sense of isolation. They stepped off creaking wooden ships with nothing but iron tools and a desperate hope, facing a wilderness that did not know their names and cared little for their survival. The arrival was not a triumph, it was a perilous gamble against starvation, disease, and the crushing weight of the unknown. As these pioneers pushed deeper into the Appalachian foothills, the dream of a new life quickly became a nightmare of blood and iron. Survival in the colonies was a brutal, daily negotiation with nature. Men and women worked until their hands bled, carving homes out of timber, all keeping one eye on the tree line. The initial conflicts were not merely over land, but over the very right to exist in a space where resources were scarce and every mistake was fatal. The soil was stubborn, the winters were unforgiving, and the peace was fragile, held together only by the sheer willpower of those who refused to let the wilderness swallow them whole. In the midst of this struggle emerged a figure who would become the architect of despair, a man of high standing and even higher ambition, whose vision for the frontier was as grand as it was ruthless. He saw not a sanctuary, but a canvas for empire, believing that the land must be tamed at any cost. His controversial policies prioritized expansion over empathy, driving a wedge between the settlers and the environment they were trying to inhabit. He was a man who spoke of progress while walking over the broken dreams of those who came before him, viewing the sprawling forests merely as timber to be harvested and the people as pawns in a global game of territory and power. Yet, as the axes fell and defenses rose, the echoes of the forgotten began to haunt the edges of the clearing. The indigenous tribes, who had lived in harmony with this land for millennia, watched as their ancestral hunting grounds were sliced into parcels of private property. Their perspectives are the silent heartbeat of this story of profound grief for a world being dismantled. They were the ones lost in the relentless march of progress, their displacement a heavy price paid for the liberty others sought. To understand the American story, one must listen to these echoes, acknowledging that every new settlement was built upon a foundation of loss that still resonates in the soul today. The tension eventually reached a breaking point in a forge of revolution. The frontier was no longer just a place of survival. It had become a pressure cooker of political resentment. The settlers, hardened by the frontier and ignored by distant crowns, began to feel a fire ignite in their hearts. They were caught between the demands of an empire and the reality of their own autonomy. Every tax, every decree, and every restriction felt like a shackle on the very hands that had cleared the forests. The spirit of defiance wasn't born in a courtroom or a parlor. It was hammered out in the heat of the frontier, where men and women realized that they owed their survival to no one but themselves. This simmering anger culminated in the midnight betrayal, a pivotal turning point where trust was shattered and the course of history shifted forever. In the dead of night, under a moon that bore witness to the treachery, a secret alliance was broken, and a long-standing peace was traded for short-term gain. This was the moment where the narrative shifted from a struggle for land to a struggle for the soul of a new nation. The betrayal forced every soul on the frontier to choose a side. turning neighbors into enemies and turning the quiet woods into a theater of war. What followed was a trial by fire, a climax of human resilience that pushed every individual to their absolute limit. The struggle that defined this era was not just a series of battles, but the test of the human spirit against the most grueling conditions imaginable. Families were torn apart, homes were reduced to ash, and the very landscape seemed to rebel against the violence. Yet, through the smoke and the suffering, a new kind of identity began to emerge, one forged in the heat of conflict and tempered by the cold reality of loss. Those who survived were no longer just settlers or subjects. They were something entirely new, bonded by the shared trauma and the shared triumph of outlasting the fire. When the smoke finally cleared, only dust and destiny remained. The aftermath of the conflict left the land scarred and the people changed, but it also cemented the long-term impact on the American identity. The frontier had been won, but at a cost that could never truly be calculated. The structures of power had shifted, and the blueprint for a nation had been drawn in the dirt. The impact was felt in the way the law was written, the way the land was distributed, and the way the American people would forever view themselves as a people born of struggle and destined for greatness, often at the expense of others. Today, we are left with the ghost of the frontier. When we look at the vast expanses of the American landscape, we are seeing more than just scenery. We are seeing a graveyard of stories and a monument to human ambition. The lessons learned from this era are complex and haunting, reminding us that progress is rarely linear and liberty is often bought with the currency of sacrifice. As we reflect on what remains, we must acknowledge the shadow as much as the light, understanding that our modern world is built on the bones of a past that was both beautiful and terrible. History is not just a collection of dates, it is a living, breathing testament to who we were and who we might become. Thank you for staying with me through this long journey into the heart of the 18th century. It is an honor to share these deep dives with you, and I hope this story stays with you long after the screen goes dark. Don't forget to subscribe and visit our channel for more deep dives into the moments that shaped our world.